Imagine waking up at 45 and realizing that you spent 20 years becoming excellent at something the world no longer values. Not because you were lazy, not because you failed, but because you stayed too long on a path that slowly stopped feeling alive. Today, I want to share a regret minimization framework that may help you avoid one of the most painful forms of regret: staying too long on the wrong path. A lot of people recently asked me something deeper. What if I already know that I'm in the wrong career, but I feel too old, too invested, or too trapped to change? And in a world where technology keeps changing every few months, this question matters more than ever. But the real question isn't just when to pivot. The real question is, why is changing life direction so psychologically difficult? Watch till the end of the video for the answer to this question. So now let's break down the regret minimization framework that I call the Pivot Quadrant. A simple way to decide whether to stay, adapt, or pivot. If you visualize a 2x2 matrix, the y-axis represents how replaceable your work is, and the x-axis represents how fulfilling your work is. Most people evaluate careers using two things: salary and stability. But those are now lagging indicators. Instead, you should ask, is my work deeply human? Which actually determines how replaceable it is. And does it make me feel alive? Which determines your fulfillment. So that now creates 4 different zones. The first quadrant is what I call the comfort trap. It's the low replaceability but low fulfillment zone. Your career is stable, your paycheck is fine, but internally you checked out years ago. This is where a lot of quiet quitting lives. You're not suffering enough to leave. You're not growing enough to feel excited either. And often, comfort slowly becomes stagnation. So the next zone is the stagnation zone, which is the zone of high replaceability and low fulfillment. Now, this is the dangerous zone. Your work is repetitive. Skills are becoming automated. And deep down, you don't even enjoy it anymore. This is where long-term regret compounds. Because every year you stay, the harder it feels to imagine another version of yourself. And you panic, which is the third quadrant, the panic zone. This is the zone of high replaceability and high fulfillment. And this one is emotionally confusing because you love what you do. Maybe you're a designer, writer, coder, editor, or analyst. But suddenly, AI tools are changing the entire industry. And this creates fear, not because you lack talent, but because the rules keep moving. And this is where many people either panic or evolve. And that brings us nicely to quadrant number 4, which is the growth horizon. This is the zone of low replaceability and high fulfillment. This is where meaningful long-term growth happens. Work that combines reasoning, creativity, trust, leadership, storytelling, emotional intelligence, and judgment. Not just doing tasks, but understanding people and solving complex problems. This is where your humanity becomes your advantage. Because in a world where technology keeps changing every few months, the biggest risk may not be failing at something new. It may be spending another decade disconnected from the person that you actually wanted to become. So how do you pivot toward the growth horizon without throwing your entire life away? You use what I call the 3 filters. The first one is the reasoning filter. Ask yourself, am I merely following processes, or am I reasoning through complexity? Because technology replaces repetition first, but humans still matter. Where trade-offs exist, ambiguity exists. Where trust matters, leadership matters, and emotions and context matter. The future belongs less to people who simply execute tasks, and more to people who can think clearly in uncertain situations. Filter number 2 is what I call the regret test. Now imagine yourself 10 years from now. Same desk, same routine, same environment. Now ask yourself, what will I regret not doing? Not vague regret, but something specific. Maybe you'll regret the business you never started. Maybe you'll regret the creative side that you abandoned, or the field that you always wanted to explore, or the version of yourself that you postponed for someday. Because regret usually whispers first before it starts screaming. Our filter number 3 is the 15-degree pivot. Here's where we answer the question, why is changing life direction so psychologically difficult? It's because most people think that a pivot means destroying everything and starting over. But usually, it doesn't. A meaningful pivot is usually just a small directional shift. Maybe a teacher learning online education, a software engineer moving into AI systems, a corporate employee building a small side business. The goal isn't always to completely become a different person immediately. A smarter pivot is simply taking the experience that you already have and applying it in a direction that feels more future-proof, more meaningful, and more alive. You don't always need a new identity. Sometimes you just need a different trajectory. I don't think regret is proof that you failed. I think regret is often a signal, a quiet reminder that there's still a small part of you asking you to grow. And if you've been feeling that tension lately, it does not mean that you're too late. It may simply mean that your life is asking for recalibration. Because the highest risk in the new era may not be losing your job. It may be slowly abandoning the version of yourself that you actually wanted to become. And if the financial side of pivoting feels scary, watch this video here on the 4 paths to financial freedom.